The future of Sonic the Hedgehog seemed pretty uncertain back in 2016. We finally reached the light at the end of the tunnel that was the boom era, 3 years where the Sonic franchise was consumed by the disastrous spin-off that crashed and burned the second Rise of Lyric released in 2014. What Sonic Team and Sega wanted to do next with Sonic outside of Twitter memes and mobile games was pretty much unknown. What I do know is, every fan wanted something to be excited about because the rolling tumbleweed that was Sonic in 2015 and 16 was pretty draining. 2016 was actually the 25th anniversary of Sonic the Hedgehog, meaning it had already been 5 years since the release of Sonic Generations, the 20th anniversary game that was the last good game at this point. And we had seemingly not progressed much at all in those 5 years. But finally, we got the 25th anniversary party and livestream where, well, it was kind of a mess from a technical perspective, but the point of bringing it up is that this is where we finally got word on what the new Sonic games were going to be. The first of them got fans all over the world cheering. Sonic Mania, a full-on throwback to the games of the 90s but done in an exciting new way. The other game announced was Sonic Team's game, Project Sonic 2017, which later came to be called Sonic Forces, but we aren't talking about that game right now. Today's video is all about Sonic Mania, the retro Sonic revival that was released back in summer of 2017. The fact that it's been 5 years since then is really something else, I gotta say. 5 years ago, I was well into the whole YouTube making thing. In fact, around the release of Mania is when I reviewed the Sonic Advance series.
And so in 2017, we now have Sonic Mania.
I'm just saying, crazy how long ago that was, and that I'm not getting any younger. On the subject of Sonic Mania, I should say yes, this game was not developed by Sonic Team, it was instead a collaboration between several groups that had already proved themselves perfect for the job. The project was being led by Christian Whitehead and Simon Tomley, two giants in the Sonic fan community throughout the 2000s, as the former worked on Retro Sonic, a full recreation of the classic Sonic gameplay, and the latter producing fan works of his own, like a proper Sonic 1 port and Game Boy Advance that absolutely trounced upon the borderline bootleg that Sega put out. Retro Sonic would lay the groundwork for the Retro engine that sought to perfect elements from the older consoles on the newer ones. In 2011, Sega contracted Christian Whitehead to use the Retro engine to make a full remaster of Sonic CD from 1993 that was available on all the current platforms at the time. And in the years that followed, Whitehead and Tomley would work on remasters of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2 on mobile devices that also ran on the Retro engine. These versions were considered by fans to be the definitive versions of Sonic 1, 2, and CD, as they were fully 16:9, updated the special stages to make them smoother to play, improvements from later games like extra characters and a save feature, and the list goes on, were added. It was really impressive stuff. Fans were left wondering if they'd ever bring Sonic 1 and 2 to consoles and PC, and remaster Sonic 3 and Knuckles to round out the remastered classic series. But that didn't come around for a while, and I don't want to talk about how it turned out at this moment in time. So I'll just stick to what was going on in the mid-2010s. While we didn't get the 3K remaster, we finally learned at the 25th anniversary party that this team of folks was working on an entirely new classic Sonic-inspired game, Sonic Mania, which was exactly what I was looking to see at the time. If you watched the last couple of videos, I've repeatedly hammered in that Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric, and the following Boom Mini era had me convinced that I was just not into Sonic anymore. The classics, Colors, and Generations were still amazing games, and I enjoyed plenty of others, but now, we're finally going to get a true follow-up to those amazing Genesis games? Sign me up! In 2017, the pre-release of Mania and Forces had gotten me a bit more invested in the series again as I did those Sonic Advance videos I mentioned a few moments ago, which made me feel like I was absolutely ready to dive into Sonic Mania when it came out, as I downloaded it the second it became available at midnight of launch day. And the response was glowing. Sonic Mania released to the best press the series had seen since Sonic Adventure 2 released on the Dreamcast in 2001. Critics across the board thought Mania was some of the best in 2D Sonic action, an incredibly faithful version of the classic Sonic gameplay, and a fun game that felt retro and new at the same time. Critics and fans loved Sonic Mania pretty much across the board because it was a truly good game, and that fact was entirely self-evident. A much-needed win for the Sonic community following the previous 5 years. As for myself, I thought it was good. Although, I can't say I've gotten as into it as other Sonic fans with hundreds of hours logged in, because this video was my third time playing the game in 5 years. Today we're going to look back at Sonic Mania 5 years later and see what made it so great, and then hopefully discover why I don't really revisit this one as much as other fans do. Going into this video, I actually did not know why, so maybe we shall now find out. To start with the obvious, you have the sheer amount of polish, love, and care that got poured into Sonic Mania. Dare I say, this is some of the highest quality craftsmanship the Sonic series has ever seen. Polish is obvious. I mean, Sonic games have notoriously not been that, and here you have Sonic Mania that doesn't suffer from any obvious technical failings as far as I can see, having played the game on PS4 at launch and on PC for all my subsequent playthroughs. But then you get into the love and care aspect. Just look at the animation in this game. It's clearly based on the old games, but it goes well beyond anything you'd see on the Sega Genesis, as Mania has all those little details I mentioned that come with the retro engine, like smooth sprite rotation and all that, but then you just see how well animated this game is and understand how much time it must have taken to perfect these elements. Look at the title screen I just showed. There are over 100 frames of animation here when you count Sonic, the banner, the background details. It's beautiful, making Sonic look really cartoony and expressive, just how you'd want him to appear. This is why I was making such a stink about Sonic 4's animation back when I reviewed Episode 1. Sonic Mania just shined a light on how utterly lame that game was. Its title screen was outshined by the ones on the Genesis with a mere 8 frames of animation. But it's just a title screen, right? In a vacuum, maybe, but when taken as a whole, the first impression says a lot. This effort level sets the stage for the game you're about to play. One of these screams a cheap mobile game turned console game to maximize profit, and the other screams labor of love for making this character as appealing and fun as possible. Waiting on the title screen brings you to this animated opening that promises a fun romp returning to the days of old. But the hits for the animation don't stop there. The gameplay is just fun to look at, as the sprite artists didn't just copy the sheets from the older games, they used them as inspiration and drew new sprite sheets for the classic trio, drawing a plethora of in-between frames to get that extra smoothness in the animation. But everything looks great in this, from the new moves like Mighty's ground pound, old ones that got reanimated like Knuckles is sliding down walls instead of climbing down them, the rings as they bounce away from you and getting damaged, the visual details like the flame shield lighting Bark on fire in Green Hill Zone, the way this gun spins and moves before blasting Sonic into the air in Mirage Saloon, the fact that all the characters have a top speed animation you see with going extra fast to help sell the speed of the characters, the music from T. Lopes that sounds like the next step from Sonic CD, which is what he said he was trying to achieve, unlike the phony-sounding Genesis synth Sonic 4 used. From a presentation perspective, Mania was done to perfection, and it makes for an experience that is a pleasure to both the eyes and ears. Everything new in this game's art direction is bursting with creativity, like the new hard-boiled heavy enemies, a squad of egg robos from Sonic 3 that got a makeover that gives them different traits as bosses, like a flying magician as one of them, a motorcycle rider for another one, or a ninja egg robo that you fight in Press Garden Zone that throws Asterons from Sonic 2 at you as its throwing stars. The game is chock full of references to not only 90s Sonic stuff, both recognizable and obscure, but also Sega history from the 90s as well. Die-hard Sega fans have a lot to love and enjoy about playing Sonic Mania, even providing players with options on how they like to see the game. For example, if you like the softer pixels from the prior Sonic remasters, you can play it like that, or if you want to emulate that feeling of a CRT, Mania has 2 great options for that too. Or if you like sharp pixel scaling, it comes with that as well. No option for 4x3 or lower FPS special stages, but still, good options otherwise. Although while I'm talking about visuals, there is one thing I want to mention about this game's presentation I was never fond of. People who have played this game have probably noticed it in my footage already, so I thought I'd mention it before I started talking about the gameplay. In my review of Sonic Generations, I praised the fact that the design of classic Sonic was an amalgamation of all the pre-SA1 Sonic art, taking inspiration from Sonic's design in various regions and art styles to produce this look for the character. When it comes to that goal, making a distinct classic Sonic that combines all that and contrasts with modern Sonic, I'm cool with it. However, Sonic Mania and Sonic Forces turned classic Sonic into a recurring character, and so this light blue appearance just became classic Sonic alongside the more cutesy look. As a recurring element in its own games, I don't like it as much. Most depictions of classic Sonic both in-game and in the artwork was that darker blue, and I always felt like it was easier on the eyes than the new light blue design he was given. Mania going a step further and making Knuckles look more pink than red, which is actually not depicted in the artwork. So what I did was download some mods to get true blue Sonic and red Knuckles. Personally, I find this so much more appealing to look at compared to the characters in the base version of Mania. Although generally the cutesy, neo-classic Sonic doesn't really appeal to me either. As a kid, I always saw old Sonic through the filter of the North American Greg Martin design, where his cool factor was front and center. So classic Sonic, seen like this, doesn't really do anything for me, especially since I thought Generations did a great job translating classic Sonic's energy to the modern age. But I understand this is a me thing, not a game thing, so let's properly dive into the gameplay of Sonic Mania. The game at launch featured the same core cast as Sonic 3 and Knuckles, meaning you have a campaign for Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, and one where you play as Sonic and Tails together. In Sonic 2 and 3, I always pick the Sonic and Tails tag team since that's the canon version of the story, but still, the choice is yours if you don't want a sidekick tagging along. In the other 2 games I mentioned, Tails could often get in your way by hitting bosses before you, leading to the player taking damage or dying. The only time this ever cropped up as a major annoyance was the Death Egg Zone boss in Sonic 3K, but in Mania, I never really had a moment like that. In fact, I feel like the player is given a greater advantage by partnering with Tails since you can control his flight with the up button and the jump button, making it really easy to, as Sonic, use Tails' flight assist to reach higher areas. This was something that they included in the remastered games, but this is the first time it was in a new game. Back in Sonic 3K, the balance between the trio was that Tails could fly over areas and obstacles, making it easier to navigate as him. Knuckles could glide and climb walls, giving him an exploration edge, but he had a lower jump height to compensate. Sonic being able to use the elemental shields to their fullest potential. All this is still true in Sonic Mania, however they granted him a new move that's completely game-changing. The drop dash, which allows you to rev up a spin dash in midair, and upon touching the ground you'll instantly take off. This is so much fun to use as you get to reach high speeds in no time at all, but still have to know what you're doing enough to take advantage of the physics at just the right angles to maintain a really high speed. It's not like a boost button or something. I've been setting this up in a plethora of my videos regarding 2D Sonic games, saying that the spin dash from Sonic 2 fundamentally changed how you approached the levels since you could stop and rev up to gain speed, unlike Sonic 1 where you only had to rely on the physics system. This difference makes revisiting the first Sonic the Hedgehog feel a bit awkward, as the spin dash was added into all major re-releases of that game. Ever since Sonic 2, they've tried finding new ways to expand Sonic's abilities, and while many of them, like the Insta-Shield in Sonic 3K, were a great use in damaging bosses and enemies if you knew the timing, they never compared to the spin dash. Often being mechanics that worked for that game, like the boost mode from Sonic Advance 2 or the partner system from Sonic Advance 3, but these never rose to the level of being a mainstay. Except for maybe the boost, since that was in 4 2D games and became a main mechanic of the 3D series. I liked how Generations gave classic Sonic an instant spin dash. I thought that was fun to use in that game. It just wasn't the kind of game changer the drop dash is because it's simple, intuitive, and plays well with the existing classic Sonic gameplay without taking anything away or just not feeling needed. To use an example of how much the drop dash has influenced Sonic since the release of Mania, it's become a given that fan projects like Triple Trouble 16-bit or Fallen Star will use it. The PO6 extended mod has one, come to think of it. Sega themselves made it a feature in all 4 classic games in the recently released Sonic Origins collection, even if the implementation was largely limp. But it's also going to be in the 3D games, starting with Sonic Frontiers. The appeal of revving up in midair and dashing away upon landing is, like I said, simple but fun. Now, I don't mean that as anything against other Sonic mechanics throughout the years, as, say, if you prefer how Sonic handled in CD or 3K, Mania has something for you. Bonus stages are recreated versions of the Blue Sphere special stages from Sonic 3, and your reward for clearing them are these medals, and if you keep unlocking more of them, you can access different gameplay features, such as a setting to have Sonic play one of 3 ways. Mania mode is where you use the drop dash, but if you play in CD mode, Sonic will use the super peel out from that game. And then there's the 3 and K mode where you use the Insta Shield. I think all 3 of these are fun to work with. The super peel out in particular is one that's grown on me quite a bit over the years. I often use it more than the spin dash, since you just press up on the D-pad and hold jump for a few seconds and you instantly have top speed, when you have to actively rev up the spin dash. I still use both, but the peel out became my go-to for quickly picking up speed on the ground. By default, you have to choose which of the 3 add-ons to the moveset you like the most, but I hit a cheat in the mod loader to grant me all 3 at once. The best way to play Mania, if you ask me. But the trio is merely how the game was at launch. Mania's wild success in 2017 prompted Sega to put out a physical edition of the title in 2018 called Sonic Mania Plus, which included a bunch of new content. The Mania Plus stuff was available to players who owned digitally through DLC though, so nobody was left out. Mania Plus added 2 new characters to the playable roster, Mighty the Armadillo and Ray the Flying Squirrel. This was a great move in terms of appealing to longtime fans. Both of them debuted in Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, the arcade game, but Ray was never used again past then, and Mighty only went on to appear in Knuckles' Chaotix for the Sega 32X in 1995, never to be seen again. It was almost a meme that they'd never return, Sonic Generations even including a missing persons poster for both of them as an Easter egg. But 6 years later, they returned, fully built from the ground up as new characters to play as. Mighty playing like Sonic, but he can ground pound through obstacles, and Ray also playing like Sonic, but he can glide up and down through the air, which took some getting used to, but when you pull it off, it's honestly more satisfying than flying over things as Tails or gliding as Knuckles, since it requires timing and practice to know when the best moments to use it are. The Plus edition added a whole new campaign called Encore Mode, where you journey through the same stages just with visual alterations like a sunset green hill or start a speedway with a red sky, and all stages getting reworked color palettes. Encore Mode's main gimmick is its characters. You start as Sonic, but then you come across this capsule that allows you to rescue Mighty and Ray, but you can only bring one of them with you, and the one that you don't save turns out to be a fake anyway. You start with Sonic and the side character of your choice, freely being able to swap between them with the press of the triangle button, but as you play, you gradually unlock the character you didn't save alongside Tails and Knuckles. When you die, the characters not on screen jump in to pick up the slack. To mix it up, you come across these randomization capsules that swap the characters you're currently playing as, if you have a full party. Maybe you have Ray and Tails now and have been playing as them for a few minutes, but if you hit the capsule, then bam, you'll be playing as Sonic and Knuckles. They don't do anything with the team-ups like Sonic Advance 3, but merely having two characters and swapping between them to use their abilities is good fun nonetheless. One might expect new levels for a new mode, but I don't mind the fact that you revisit the same stages as the new visuals allow them to feel fresh, and the character swapping allows me to experience the stages as other characters without having to play the entire game 5 times, and it even gave us a unique version of Mirage Saloon Act 1, different from the Tornado Chase in Sonic's campaign, and the ground version from Knuckles' story. Besides that, I don't mind playing the game again because the levels are fun. Mania offers everything fans of the classic series would want in its levels. Bits of speed that come after tougher segments, the ability to skip chunks of levels with well-timed dashes, skilled players maintaining higher routes and more open-ended stages, which are often the more difficult paths to reach, but faster than the ones on the ground. All those fundamentals I've been talking about since I discussed the first 4 games back in spring 2020 are here in Mania throughout its 12-zone-long campaign. The levels themselves provide a lot of great content, but I will admit, I was never crazy about this game's actual level roster. We have 12 zones, like I said, which is an amount of stages that can stand toe-to-toe with Sonic 3 and Knuckles, unlike the pitiful 4 zones in each episode of Sonic 4. But I'm sure you know what I'm about to say, and it's that I wish Mania had more original stages. In this set of 12, you have 4 totally new zones. Studiopolis Zone, a bright and saturated modern-styled city run by Eggman and his programming. Press Garden Zone, Eggman's printing press facility. Mirage Saloon, a Wild West-themed stage that harkened back to a cut level from Sonic 2, and the final level, Titanic Monarch, the Palace of the Heavy King. These levels are flooded with creative ideas, like these water towers in Mirage Saloon that you press down on to create a path to run on. And if you run out of water, you fall into spikes or enemies. Or just Press Garden in general feeling like such a fresh new location, getting the tropes in from an ice level but mixing it with this forest aesthetic and these factory tropes all mixed into one. But then most of the game is spent playing old zones. Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1, Chemical Plant and Oil Ocean Zone from Sonic 2, Stardust Speedway and Metallic Madness from Sonic CD, and Flying Battery, Hydrocity, and Lava Reef from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Here's the wild thing about the old levels in Mania. It's pretty clear that a lot of thought and effort went into how these levels were going to be redone. For example, Act 1 might be similar to the stage you remember from the Genesis, but then Act 2 will introduce something new that changes the experience. Chemical Plant seeing you mix these different chemicals to bounce up higher and higher throughout. Flying Battery taking the player to the exterior of the base as you bounce between these electric generators and enemies, or Oil Ocean adding a new element in Act 2 where the gas clouds become poisonous, so you need to keep moving forward to find these switches to clear them for a bit, for fear of losing rings when the air becomes too toxic. Mixing elements from the original stage with the main gimmick of Sandopolis Act 2 from Sonic 3K. Lava Reef Act 2 being like the original from 3K, but also using the conveyor belt gimmick from Quartz Quadrant in CD. On that note, the levels from Sonic CD saw the biggest improvement as that game's level design was pretty all over the place, lacking the consistent quality the Genesis trilogy had, often becoming aimlessly bouncing between springs and other obstacles. Stardust Speedway being turned into a much simpler stage of platforming and speed, and Metallic Madness introducing some cool gimmicks like being launched into the background of the stage and finding your way back into the foreground. So even in its reused levels, Sonic Mania is bursting at the seams with creativity. However, it's just hard for me to get hyped about it, you know? It's a pretty neat surprise that they pull the Death Egg robot on you in Green Hill Zone as opposed to it being a late game boss, but at this point, I saw the Death Egg robot in Sonic 4 Episode 1 and Sonic Generations right after that. I think this is the most interesting use of the boss fight, but it just loses a lot of luster because it's something I've seen before several times. Green Hill was a stage in Sonic 4 Episode 1, Sonic Generations, Sonic Lost World, and now Sonic Mania. It might be well designed in Mania, but the trope itself feels exhausted. The same goes for Chemical Plant, which is also in Generations. It's very cool that Stardust Speedway brings Metal Sonic back for a new version of the Sonic CD race, the player also having to fight Metal Sonic Kai from Knuckles' Chaotix, but I don't know, I just still have more fond memories of the version we got in CD back when the concept was new. To its credit, Mania brings back stages you wouldn't imagine coming back like Metallic Madness or Hydro City Zone, giving them fresh ideas, but it just doesn't leave me feeling excited when I do feel that way when I replay these moments from the games that they came from. At least contextually, it makes sense. On premise alone, it's weird that the player is getting bounced between new locations and then locations from South Island, West Side Island, Little Planet, and Angel Island, but it's all because of the new MacGuffin, the Phantom Ruby, that has the ability to, as we later learned, warp reality in a way that feels real to those experiencing it. The Phantom Ruby having given the hard-boiled heavies their new abilities, and also warping Sonic and Co to these past locations. But still, I'm only saying that when playing through these old levels again, I just don't get as excited as I feel I should be. Take Lava Reef as the perfect example. When I think of this stage in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, I think about how this level is the final challenge before the climax of the game. You might have crashed the Death Egg and launched Base Zone, but the threat throughout the second half of the game is making sure it can't take off again as the thing looms in the background of the entire level, lighting the cool part on fire at the end of Act 2 as Knuckles gets in your way once more before you stop it from launching. These are moments that I recall because of that gameplay story connection. In Mania, Lava Reef is a really well-designed stage. It's got clever nooks and crannies to look through, a quality mix of speed and platforming, and interesting bosses to close Act 1 and Act 2, but it doesn't draw any strong memories from playing it past that. All this leading to the final level, Titanic Monarch, where I feel like I'm going through the motions more than anything else. It's not a bad level, I just tend to tune out as the main gimmick of Act 2 in particular is these rooms of teleporters you need to navigate through to get to the end. Speaking of which, like Sonic 3, there's a secret final boss for collecting all the Chaos Emeralds. To do that, it's also just like 3K. Hidden in every stage are several giant rings that warp you to a special stage where this time you have to chase a UFO holding a Chaos Emerald. I think these are some of the best special stages the series has done. For starters, props to it for being entirely original. So many Sonic games just reuse the same special stage tropes from Sonic 1 and Sonic 2, but not this game. But then on top of that, it's simple to pick up and play, and is fun. The special stages in Mania involve on-the-fly decision-making as you need to grab rings in order to extend your time limit, but you need to grab blue spheres to go faster. So when there's a diverging pathway, you have to decide which of the two you want to extend first, your time or your speed. I always go for the speed-ups first, since I feel like if the UFO gets too far away from you, it's almost impossible to catch up to it, but your mileage may vary on that. The later special stages have increased moments of risk and reward, like placing an instant speed boost over a pit that will instantly boot you back to the main stage if you fail. But if you get it right, it's pretty satisfying. With these facts outlined, I think it's easy to see why I find the special stages in Mania to be some of the most fun in the series. Beating them all grants you Super Sonic like usual, who can jump higher, run faster, and is invincible, all that good stuff. But Mania also brought Super Knuckles back into the series, which hadn't happened in over 20 years at this point, even allowing Tails to go super with the Chaos Emeralds only, unlike 3K. Mighty and Ray also got super forms as well. In the true final boss, Super Sonic fends off against Dr. Eggman and the Heavy King as the two villains struggle to get the Phantom Ruby, which is a really dynamic setup for a final boss, the player having to dodge the attacks coming your way and time your own attacks against the enemies, as opposed to most Super Sonic battles, which often are about the spectacle more than the strategy. In the end, classic Sonic becomes wrapped up in the energy of the Phantom Ruby, which seemed like a tease for Sonic Forces, which as I said was releasing later that year. But for now, that ended Sonic Mania. As I said earlier, Sonic Mania is some of the finest craftsmanship the Sonic IP has ever seen. In fact, I can't think of many examples where a Sonic game has outdone Mania in terms of polish, stability, and animation. Especially in the 2D field, as no other game in the 2D series added the kind of game-changing quality of life features Mania had. It's a labor of love from people who know what they're doing in terms of making classic Sonic fun to play. However, when it came out, I was playing it at midnight, and I remember that when I reached Studiopolis, I just stopped playing for the night. It took me a while to finish the game as Sonic and Tails, gather the emeralds, and see the true ending. This game was a real surprise to me because this game was everything I thought I wanted in a Sonic game. Momentum-based physics, charming art, and colorful visuals. Stages are swift and are pulled from the very best Sonic games, so why am I not losing my mind like so many other people? I will reiterate, the quality of Sonic Mania was never in dispute from me. The game just never excites me. I love what it does and adds, but I think now I've come to understand. I loved the nostalgia of Generations because it used all that in an exciting next-gen game. Sonic Mania is the cream of the crop as far as 16-bit revival games are concerned, but the old content is, while intelligently used, just not what I'm looking for in Sonic, so it's never stood out to me as one of my favorite Sonic games despite the fact that it's one of the most well-made. Which is pretty much all I've got to say on Sonic Mania. Great game, not really a game I'm inclined to revisit despite the fact that I thought it would be prior to release. And I can't say it has anything to do with nostalgia because as I've established before, the classic Sonic games were the first ones I've ever played. I've got a plethora of memories of each one, so I appreciate the various references to 90s Sonic that I've gone into throughout the video, but like I said, I find those moments more enjoyable in the old games. It's an excellent game I enjoy while playing, it just didn't capture my attention when the console was off. But that only made me wonder, what is it that I truly want in Sonic after all? Well, I guess that's best saved for next week's video where we shall finally go back to the game that kicked off this whole thing, Sonic Forces. Crazy to think there's only one Sonic review left before Frontiers, but we've reached that time. So until that video arrives, I'll say what I always do. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.